When the Queen's private will was finally unsealed at a secure royal chamber, few expected anything beyond ceremonial artifacts and gracious acknowledgments. But what unfolded left the monarchy shaken, a shock inheritance involving the Queen's most cherished legacy, her unrivaled horse racing empire. And the name attached to it? Not Beatrice, not Eugenie, but Zara. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For over 7 decades, horse racing had not simply been a pastime for Queen Elizabeth II, it had been her refuge. In the quiet solitude of her stables, away from the relentless flash of cameras and pressures of crown and country, she found something rare: control, peace, and purpose. The Queen's bond with her horses was deeply personal, each name carefully chosen, every victory cherished. In moments of national crisis or personal turmoil, it was to the track she turned. Her equestrian world was sacred, a symbol of continuity in a world always changing. So when word spread that this legacy was to be included in her private will, tension began to thicken like a thundercloud within the palace walls. For months, the will remained locked under layers of royal protocol, its contents shielded even from senior family members. Many speculated it was purely symbolic, perhaps a few treasured brooches, a note to her beloved corgis. But inside the palace, among those who had walked closely in her shadow, expectations ran higher. Prince Andrew, ever the strategist, believed his eldest daughter Beatrice would be named successor to the Queen's horse racing affairs. Beatrice, after all, had grown up under her grandmother's gaze, often seen riding alongside her through the Balmoral hills. Eugenie, more detached from the racing world, remained a neutral figure, supportive, yet expectant. Still, it was Beatrice whose heart quietly throbbed with anticipation. Palace corridors buzzed with whispers. Aides, staff, and inner-circle confidants muttered about a bold move written in ink, something unexpected, even revolutionary. When the day of the unsealing finally arrived, the mood in Windsor's private library was electric and tense. Present were Prince Andrew, Beatrice, Eugenie, Princess Anne, and a small cluster of legal advisors. The Queen's most trusted solicitor opened the envelope with gloved hands, his voice trembling slightly as he began to read. The will was dignified, methodical until it wasn't. Then came the line. The sentence that turned the air to ice. The entirety of my equestrian estate, including horses, breeding rights, and the Royal Ascot Trust, shall pass to my granddaughter Zara Ann Elizabeth Tyndall. For several seconds, no one moved. The silence was so thick it seemed to swallow the room whole. Beatrice's eyes didn't blink. Eugenie shifted uncomfortably. Andrew's jaw visibly clenched, yet no words came. Princess Anne remained composed, but her glance towards Zara, who wasn't even present, revealed something more than pride. It was vindication. As the room struggled to breathe in the aftermath, one face remained frozen: Princess Beatrice. But the story behind that stunned silence began long before the will was ever opened. She wasn't just a princess. Beatrice was a rider, a dreamer, a child who grew up weaving braids into ponies' manes under her grandmother's watchful gaze. Her connection to the Queen's stables wasn't political, it was personal. So how did she end up excluded from the very legacy she thought was hers? The story began long before the world noticed, before headlines screamed betrayal and inheritance, before Zara's name stole the air from a royal chamber. It began in the quiet moments between a little girl and a monarch who ruled both a nation and a field of racing champions. Balmoral was where it truly unfolded, where Princess Beatrice learned not just to ride, but to listen. The Queen's voice wasn't always grand. It was often a soft whisper in the early Scottish mist. She would tell Beatrice stories of the great mares, of the courage it took to breed, to train, to believe. For Beatrice, those lessons sank deeper than royal protocol ever could. She took to the saddle like it was second nature. While other royal children grew bored with their riding lessons, Beatrice thrived. She participated in junior events, turned heads at charity pony races, and never failed to beam when attending Ascot beside the Queen. Those were her golden memories, the ones she replayed in the silence of royal engagements and the frenzy of the press. Elizabeth too had a way of nurturing confidence in her without ever crowning her with certainty. Still, Beatrice felt it. That unspoken understanding, that promise in their shared glances across the stable yard, this would one day be yours. Through the trials of adolescence, through public scrutiny and personal trials, the Queen remained a constant. When scandals swirled around the family name, when doubts crept into her father's position, it was the Queen who pulled Beatrice aside. "Let them speak," she had once whispered, while brushing the mane of a chestnut mare, "but always ride forward." That phrase became a compass in Beatrice's life, guiding her through heartbreak, headlines and hard choices, and behind the scenes, she gave back supporting charities that used equestrian therapy to heal wounded veterans and children with disabilities. It wasn't about status, it was about purpose. But the truth, as ever in royalty, was more complicated than appearances. For all her quiet dedication, Beatrice never lobbied for the Queen's equestrian estate. She never wrote the letters or asked the questions, because she never believed she needed to. Her loyalty ran too deep to question the obvious. In her heart, the inheritance was not a gift to be requested, it was a legacy waiting to be received. Yet that very silence became her undoing. For while Beatrice waited with faith, the Queen made a choice, one whispered into the ear of someone else entirely. But even deeper than Beatrice's love for horses was her unwavering trust in one man, the man who just confirmed her greatest heartbreak. In an unprecedented move, Prince Andrew addressed the family, his voice cracking with restrained emotion. His words confirmed the unthinkable. Not only was Zara the chosen successor, but he had known about the Queen's decision for months and said nothing to Beatrice. The room was still raw from the shock of the will. But what came next wasn't in any document. It came from Andrew himself, delivered not with arrogance, but with the tone of a man cornered by his own silence. They were gathered in a side drawing room at Windsor, just the immediate family. Just hours after the unsealing, the air was thick with tension, expectation, confusion. Beatrice sat closest to her father, still wide-eyed, still reeling. It was then, perhaps too soon, perhaps too late, that Andrew cleared his throat and began. "She told me," he said, "months ago." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Every word fell like a stone into a pond of disbelief. It was her choice. She said Zara had the grit, the instinct. That Beatrice, he hesitated, glanced at his daughter, then forced the words out like a confession. She said Beatrice was too vulnerable, too exposed to the media. The silence that followed was cruel. Beatrice didn't speak, she didn't cry, not yet. She only stared, her eyes searching his face for any sign of remorse. But Andrew, ever the tactician, didn't offer comfort. Only explanation. He detailed a private visit to Balmoral just 6 months before the Queen's passing. A one-on-one meeting, no aides, no notes. Just a mother and her son walking the same familiar paths they had walked for decades. According to Andrew, it was then that the Queen shared her firm intent. Zara would inherit everything tied to the racing estate. Not because of favoritism, she had said, but because of readiness. Because Zara knew the world of sport and pressure. Because she didn't flinch under scrutiny. Because she didn't carry the scars Beatrice did. For Beatrice, the words were more than betrayal, they were humiliation. The years of quiet devotion, the riding lessons, the charity work, the hope, all reduced to a judgment of fragility. She didn't speak, but her tears said enough. And then came the moment no one expected. Eugenie, always the mediator, stepped in. She demanded answers. "Why didn't you tell her?" she asked, her voice sharper than usual. "Why keep it from her?" Andrew didn't waver. "Because it would have broken her earlier," he replied. "And I thought, maybe it wouldn't come to this." But it had come to this. And as Beatrice looked away, tears tracing down her cheek in silence, a new emotion began to surface, disbelief turning into something colder. Because someone else in the room had remained perfectly still, not shocked, not shaken, just composed. And it was in that composure that the truth began to crystallize. As Beatrice's world crumbled, another royal stood unmoved because she had known all along. And she never asked for it. She never wanted a crown, but Zara Tindall was born to ride. With Olympic medals under her belt and mud on her boots, she embodied the Queen's unfiltered love for the sport. but even she was stunned to discover just how deep her grandmother's trust had gone. For Zara, the saddle had always been more than sport, it was identity. From a young age, she had distanced herself from royal titles and traditions, preferring the raw honesty of competition to the pageantry of court life. While others posed for portraits, Zara was up at dawn, training horses, bruising her shins, chasing excellence, and yet, despite her aversion to royal performance, no one held her in higher regard than her grandmother. The Queen, who had seen countless heirs buckle under pressure, had found in Zara something rare, a resilience that asked for nothing but delivered everything. Every victory Zara claimed on the international circuit, every moment she held her nerve on a cross-country course, was met with the Queen's quiet pride. Not with fanfare or parades, but with that unmistakable gleam in her eye. It was never said aloud, but it was there, unshakable trust. And so, when Zara learned, she had been named the sole inheritor of the Queen's cherished equestrian estate, she wasn't jubilant, she was speechless. The responsibility crashed into her like thunder on a clear day. She hadn't asked for it, hadn't expected it. In fact, she had actively distanced herself from royal expectation for most of her adult life. That night, back home with Mike, she sat with the letter in her lap. It wasn't just an inventory of horses and land, it was a legacy, the Queen's final word on who she believed could carry the torch. And yet, even in that honor, Zara's hands trembled. "They'll hate me for this," she had whispered. "Not everyone," Mike said. "But someone will." The fear wasn't paranoia. Zara knew the stakes. Beatrice, especially, would see the inheritance as a direct rejection, not of competence, but of kinship, and that truth hurt Zara more than she expected. She didn't want the stables to become a battlefield. She didn't want her grandmother's final gesture to become a scar on the family. But she also couldn't turn it down, not when the Queen had entrusted her with such clarity. Alongside the will had been a handwritten letter, dated 3 months before Elizabeth's death. In it, the Queen had expressed her hope that Zara would ride forward not as a royal, but as a horsewoman, uncompromising, unshaken, and untitled. That line rang louder than any coronation, so Zara made her decision quietly but firmly. She would accept the legacy, but she would keep it grounded, free from spectacle, and protected from palace power games. No announcements, no flaunting, just stewardship. She would honor the horses, the estate, the breeding lines. She would preserve it not for status, but for soul. Yet even in that humility, the truth burned through the marble walls of the monarchy. But no matter how graceful Zara's intentions, the ripples of her inheritance spread like wildfire, and nowhere more explosively than within the royal household. The moment the news reached palace aides and insiders, divisions deepened, allegiances were tested, senior royals whispered of favoritism, while others questioned the Queen's judgment in her final days. And at the center of it all, a stunned Princess Beatrice and a newly empowered Zara. What had begun as a private inheritance soon ignited into a quiet war within the walls of Buckingham and beyond. Whispers turned to pointed stares. Hushed conversations turned into calculated distance. Queen Camilla, ever the pragmatist, made her opinion painfully clear behind closed doors. "Symbolic nonsense," she reportedly scoffed during a briefing. To her, the transfer of an equestrian empire meant little in terms of real influence. But that tone, dismissive and clipped, only amplified tensions. Because while Camilla dismissed the inheritance as quaint and irrelevant, others saw it as something far more potent, a crownless coronation. And Princess Anne saw it first. Her defense of Zara was fierce, uncompromising. It was said she directly confronted Beatrice days after the will reading, not to gloat, but to make one thing unmistakably clear, that Zara had earned every inch of it. She never asked for it, Anne had said, voice cold with conviction. She never needed a title to be worthy. Beatrice, still grieving the blow, could barely speak in return. And in that silence the cracks widened. Prince William's quiet support for Zara became another knife to Beatrice's side. Though he offered no public statement, insiders noted that he had met privately with Zara soon after the inheritance was confirmed. Whatever words were exchanged weren't leaked. But the outcome was unmistakable. Zara had his backing. And in royal circles, that meant far more than a simple nod. For Beatrice, the isolation grew heavier. Even Eugenie, who had tried desperately to mediate, found herself caught in an impossible place, torn between her sister's pain and her cousin's rightful pride. Then came the leaks. First, an anonymous source spoke of the Queen's growing concern over Beatrice's sensitivity to public opinion. Then headlines appeared: Zara crowned in silence, Beatrice snubbed by her own blood, the forgotten heir. The press devoured it. Social media ignited. Every image of Zara on horseback was met with comments praising her humility, her strength, her non-royal stature. Every photo of Beatrice was dissected for hints of resentment, weakness, or bitterness. And all the while, within palace walls, tension simmered. Camilla kept her distance. Anne stood taller. William remained silent. And Beatrice, once confident in her place within the Queen's heart, felt herself slowly vanishing from the narrative. But the full story behind the Queen's decision wasn't just about horses. It traced back to wartime vows, personal tragedies, and a final promise kept in secret. Buried within a private collection at Sandringham was a handwritten note dated 1986, a letter from the Queen to her racing advisor, detailing a pact forged decades ago. A pact that would shape the fate of her beloved horses long before her granddaughters were even born. It was found weeks after the funeral, locked inside an unmarked drawer in a side cabinet, tucked beneath racing records and pedigree charts. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, elegant, and urgent. The ink had faded with time, but the words pulsed with meaning. This wasn't a casual note. It was a testament. In the letter, Queen Elizabeth recounted a promise made in the quiet shadow of World War II, a time when the monarchy had been forced to question not just its future but its relevance. She had watched her own mother endure that era with poise, clinging to tradition through the horses. She so adored. That legacy, the Queen wrote, was not to be preserved by symbolism or ceremony but by grit, and that vow, once private, now cast light on a decision that had left so many stunned. The letter traced the Queen's lifelong belief in earned merit over inherited duty. She praised the strength of those who worked without applause, those who laboured in the mud, rain, and unrelenting strain of the sport. She wrote candidly of her growing doubt in the old systems, in the notion that a title alone could prepare someone for the pressure of managing such a legacy. A stable, she penned, is not a court. It cannot be run by protocol or protected by publicists. It must be governed by instinct, by patience, and by steel. Then came the mention of her daughter, Anne, the woman who, without complaint, had been by her side at every major racing decision. The woman who had passed that same sensibility to her daughter, Zara. The Queen had seen the shift long before the world did. She had watched as Beatrice, despite her loyalty and charm, retreated from the harsh spotlight, increasingly bruised by media cruelty. Zara, on the other hand, met challenges head-on, refusing to trade authenticity for pageantry. In the Queen's eyes, one held the name, the other held the fire, and that distinction, she confessed, had come to define her view of succession not for the crown, but for the legacy of the saddle. Near the letter's close was a line both poetic and devastating: "Let the future ride with the one who knows the saddle, not the throne." A choice made not in spite of her bloodline, but because she dared to see beyond it. The revelation shifted the public narrative almost overnight. It wasn't an insult, it wasn't favoritism, it was history. A promise made and, decades later, fulfilled with surgical precision. But if the Queen had made peace with her choice, the nation now turned its attention elsewhere. Zara had been chosen. The reasoning was now clear. But what of the one left behind? What of Beatrice, who had loved quietly, believed deeply, and now stood in the shadow of a legacy that had never truly been hers? Now understanding the origins of the Queen's choice, the public turned their gaze toward Beatrice not for answers, but for a reaction that stunned the nation. At what should have been a routine royal appearance at Royal Ascot, Beatrice walked past the stables and froze. The cameras caught her in a moment of vulnerability, eyes welled with tears, lips trembling, and a whispered phrase that no one could forget: "It should have been me." The world saw it unfold in real time. She wasn't meant to be the story that day. All eyes were supposed to be on the ceremony, the horses, the polished glamour of tradition. But as Beatrice approached the very grounds that once held her dearest childhood memories, something inside her shattered. The stables, usually alive with warmth and nostalgia, now stood as a reminder of what had been taken. For a moment, the princess, so often poised, so carefully composed, let the mask slip. One hand reached for her collarbone, as if steadying a storm from within. Her lips moved just enough for a nearby photographer to catch the words, raw and unfiltered. Within hours, they were everywhere. It should have been me. The phrase became a headline, a hashtag, a movement. Press outlets flooded with commentary. Body language experts dissected the footage frame by frame. Palace insiders leaked that aides had been blindsided by her reaction. According to multiple sources, Beatrice had not been fully briefed on Zara's presence at the event, nor had she been warned about a special tribute being quietly arranged in Zara's honor behind the grandstand. What was supposed to be a shared royal moment became a painfully personal confrontation with legacy and loss. She hadn't planned to cry, but emotion doesn't wait for permission, and when it arrived, it was unstoppable. Within the palace, panic surged. Aides scrambled to take control of the narrative. Briefings were issued to sympathetic journalists, painting Beatrice's display as a sign of passion and deep connection to Her Majesty's legacy. But the internet had already chosen its headline, #Justice for Beatrice. The hashtag exploded, trending across platforms as royal watchers demanded acknowledgement of what they saw as a cruel oversight. Supporters posted photos of Beatrice as a child riding beside the Queen, videos of her charitable work in equestrian therapy, reminders that legacy isn't earned solely in medals but in loyalty and heartbreak. A.D. Yet, as the storm brewed, Zara did not respond publicly. She didn't issue a statement. She didn't take to the press or social media. Instead, when it was her turn to enter the arena, she paused just briefly and bowed her head in Beatrice's direction. It wasn't grand. It wasn't performative. But for those watching closely, it was unmistakable. Whether it was guilt, respect, or a silent gesture of peace, it echoed louder than any interview. Not everyone was interested in subtlety. Queen Camilla, allegedly overheard by a staffer, was said to have responded to the drama with a flick of her hand and 6 cutting words, "We can't all have everything, darling." The remark, leaked within hours, only poured fuel on an already blazing fire. For Beatrice, the wound was now public, and for Zara, the pressure to justify her inheritance had never been heavier. But in the storm's center came a quiet peace offering, one that could either heal a wound or reopen it entirely. In a bold and unexpected move, Zara announced a new initiative under the Queen's Equestrian Trust, inviting Beatrice to co-chair a historic program in the Queen's name. Was it a reconciliation, a token, or a subtle olive branch that carried more weight than anyone realized? The announcement came not from a press office or palace balcony, but from the heart of the sport itself. During a nationally televised equestrian event in Gloucestershire, Zara took to the podium with understated confidence. The cameras rolled, the crowd leaned in, and what followed stunned even the most seasoned royal watchers. With her voice calm but firm, Zara unveiled the Elizabeth Legacy Programme, a new initiative designed to support and empower young female riders across Britain. It would provide grants, mentorship, and training to girls who, like her, had found themselves on horseback before they ever understood titles. But what truly sent shockwaves through the crowd wasn't the mission, it was the name attached beside hers. "And I am honored," Zara concluded, "to invite my cousin Princess Beatrice to serve as co-chair." Gasps were muffled by applause, but behind the scenes, reactions were far from unified. For some, this was the olive branch they'd hoped for, a gesture of unity that transcended inheritance, politics, and pain. For others, it reeked of strategy, a calculated PR move to quiet the storm that had followed Beatrice's very public heartbreak. Was it guilt, redemption, or simply the realization that the Queen's legacy company would not thrive on division? Behind closed doors, a private meeting took place between the two cousins just days later. It was not filmed, it was not documented, but palace aides confirmed that the conversation was emotional, hesitant, and far from resolved. Beatrice, still nursing the sting of being passed over, reportedly accepted the invitation, but not without tears. not without voicing the pain that had consumed her since the will was read. Zara, for her part, didn't apologize. Instead, she spoke of duty, of the Queen's expectations, of the weight they both now carried. Whether the exchange brought peace or simply quieted the feud remained unclear, but one thing was certain: they had found a fragile middle ground. The media, predictably, tore the moment apart. Headlines ranged from united in legacy to royal damage control. Social media debates reignited. Was Beatrice being given a real seat at the table, or was she merely a figurehead in a narrative she no longer controlled? Even within the palace, opinions were divided. Some saw it as the monarchy's attempt to lean into healing, to forge a more modern story of sisterhood and second chances. Others whispered that the scars still ran deep and would for years. Still, the launch of the program marked a shift, subtle but seismic. For the first time since the Queen's passing, the focus moved from what had been lost to what could still be built. It was, perhaps, what the Queen would have wanted. But even as the monarchy embraced this symbolic gesture of unity, an unspoken question echoed across the halls, tabloids, and tea tables alike. And yet, the question still lingered in every drawing room and tabloid headline. What would the Queen say if she were here? The final answer lay not in words, but in a single object. In a locked drawer within the Queen's private study, a final surprise awaited. A delicate charm shaped like a horse's head, with an engraving, "To be, you will always ride beside me." A gift never sent, a message never delivered. Until now, it was discovered by a trusted aide weeks after the dust had begun to settle. The royal archivists were cataloguing the Queen's personal effects, journals, letters, tokens of a lifetime, and tucked beneath a worn leather-bound notebook was a small velvet pouch. Inside, the charm lay untouched, polished as if waiting. The engraving, faint but legible, carried a gravity no official document ever could. It wasn't protocol, it wasn't royal decree, it was personal. And it bore a name only partially spoken: B. There was no doubt who it was for, no doubt what it meant. And when it was finally passed to Princess Beatrice in a discreet envelope, the palace held its breath. She opened it alone. No cameras, no aides, no sister, no father. Just her, in the quiet corner of her private quarters. What she saw undid her in seconds. The tears came not in torrents, but slowly, steadily, with the ache of a truth finally acknowledged. She clutched the charm like a secret she had waited years to hear spoken. For all the disappointment, all the silence, all the decisions that had left her standing on the outside, this was the Queen's voice. Undiluted. Not a correction, not a reversal, but a reminder that love had been there all along. That though the stables may not have been hers to manage, she had never truly been excluded. She had never truly been forgotten. Word of the charm didn't leak to the press. It didn't trend. It wasn't meant to. But those closest to the family whispered of a moment days later at the final dedication of the Elizabeth Legacy program, when Beatrice stood beside Zara, shoulders touching. Just before the ceremony began, Zara gently placed her hand on Beatrice's shoulder, no words spoken, and Beatrice nodded. Not with fanfare, not with forced smiles, but with a kind of peace that hadn't existed between them until then. For the first time, the grief they both carried no longer clashed, it harmonized. Each had lost something. Each had gained something. And somewhere in the space between, the Queen's legacy found its balance. That charm, insignificant to the world, meant everything to Beatrice. It was the thread that stitched the wound closed. It was the final piece of a story too complicated for headlines. The monarchy hadn't chosen sides, it had, in the end, chosen both. The horses went to the rider, the memory went to the heart, and the family, still fractured in places, took one step closer to healing. In a monarchy defined by tradition, this was a legacy born not from titles but from truth. And in the end, the Queen's greatest race was never about the crown, it was about who had the courage to carry the reins. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.